All right, good evening. Welcome back to another Classic Comics live stream where I cover an episode of the original Star Trek series. All right, this is going to be Friday's Child. This is and I'm going in production order here. So this is the third episode that was produced for the second season. All right. And I'll start out saying hello to Lord Thoth. Hello, sir. Thank you for stopping by. It's good to see you. Always glad to see you here. Okay, and as always, I'm going to be reading uh, from Mark Cushman's book. These are the voyages for the behind-the-scenes information. We'll just go ahead and get going here, I guess. So, this episode written by DC Fontana, directed by Joseph Pevney. Now, this is from an NBC press release issued on November 19th, 1967. Dispatched to the mineral-rich planet Capella to negotiate a mining treaty, Captain Kirk and a landing party are imprisoned when they intervened in an execution in Friday's Child on NBC Television Network's colorcast of Star Trek, Friday, December 1st. Julie Newmar guest stars. In Miss Newmar, the widow of assassinated ruler Akar, played by Ben Gage, faces execution to prevent her unborn child from becoming legal heir to the country's ruling power. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy realize they have violated a tribal law by their intervention and face death as a consequence unless they can get help from the Enterprise. Too late, they discover they are cut off from the ship and have been left stranded. Maab, the new tribal leader known as the High Tier, and his supporters among the 7 foot tall warrior race, favor doing business with the Klingons, represented by Krass. Condemned to death, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy and Elian, who is close to giving birth, flee for their lives, seeking refuge in the mountains. Meanwhile, the Enterprise with Mr. Scott in command has been lured away by a Klingon vessel. The theme of this story is one of personal sacrifice and the true meaning of courage. Friday's Child is everything that NBC was asking for. It's a fast paced action adventure with a story that unfolds primarily on a planet, filmed at an outdoor location with a top name guest star. The script and Joseph Pevney's direction have great energy and wit. The rapid transposing of action on the planet and on the Enterprise, along with numerous well placed moments of humor, keep everything moving at a brisk clip and provide for an entertaining tale. The casting is also effective. Julie Newmar, in particular, is delightful as the unhappily pregnant Elian. The theme, the one Roddenberry inserted into the script during rewrites, of personal sacrifice and the true meaning of courage, has Kirk and company instinctively putting their lives on the line for Elian and her unborn child. Elian at first has no appreciation or even understanding of their actions. In the end, she learns from their examples and offers her life for theirs and for the child she didn't think she wanted. Even more poignant, Mob, the new leader of the fearless Capellans, also learns about courage and sacrifice, as do we. And hello, J Rocker. I don't know what's going on, but the comments aren't showing up in StreamYard. I can see them on YouTube, but I'm not seeing them in StreamYard for some reason. I'm in, I don't know what's going on. Uh, no, I don't know what's going on. I'm not seeing them in StreamYard. I don't know why. But anyway, thank you for being here, Jay Rocker. Good to see you. Okay. All right, let's just go ahead and we'll go get into the episode here. Right, so the Enterprise is in orbit of Capella 4. Now, McCoy has visited this planet years earlier and tells Kirk and the others about the Capellans, who are large humanoids with a fatalistic warrior ethos, and they have a very dangerous bladed weapon called a Kleegit. Oh, and they're watching Star Trek. I don't know. I don't know why it always cracks me up to watch this scene because there's footage from the episode on the view screen. So it's like they're watching Star Trek. So the Capellan Society has many taboos and superstitions. The Federation wants Kirk to secure a mining agreement with the Capellans, and of course, to do that, they'll have to avoid offending them. So Kirk decides that they'll stick to a small landing party. Scotty is left in command with a warning to be on the lookout for the Klingons, who are also interested in establishing mining rights on Capella. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a red shirt, who I'm sure will be totally fine, beam down to the planet. And they're quickly met by a group of Capellans. Doth mother know you weareth her drapes? It didn't really hit me when I watched this as a kid. I look at it now and it's like, wow, these costumes. Um, I mean, he's basically, it looks like Mob is wearing like drapes or curtains or something. And then the others, they all have this kind of weird fur. I don't know where they live. Whoville? I mean, they have all this weird fur. I don't know. This guy's wearing like Snuffleupagus fur or something. Okay, so then there is a Klingon that's already down there with him. So the red shirt, of course, draws his phaser, and then one of the Compellans kills him with a Kliegit. And again, written by DC Fontana, directed by Joseph Pevney. Kirk is outraged by the death of his crewman, but there's not a whole lot he can do without causing a real incident and maybe killing Capellans, and that's not going to get the mining agreement secured. So he kind of swallows his outrage, and Mob demands that they disarm themselves. And Kirk and the others reluctantly do so. They're into a tent to wait to meet the leader of the tribe. And Kirk's not happy, and he is worried about and wondering how many more crewmen are going to die on this mission. Now, up on the Enterprise, Chekhov has detected a ship that is right out at the very edge of sensor range, and it keeps kind of winking in and out. They think it's a ship, and Scotty tells him to keep an eye on it. Back on Capella, Barbara Eden comes by to give Kirk some fruit. And she offers him some food, but McCoy warns him, don't take it. If you take the food from her, then like her closest male relative will challenge you to a duel to the death. And then they're taken to see Chieftain Akar, High Tier of the Capellans. And they also meet his wife, Elian, played by Julie Newmar, who is heavily pregnant. And Mob is there with the Klingon Krass. Now, Krass makes his argument that the Capellans should work with the Klingons because the Klingons, like the Capellans, are warriors and they have a rather harsh ethos that they only survive, that sort of thing. And Akar isn't convinced because he notes that while the ways of the Earthers are strange, they've never lied to us. And Eliane agrees with Crash. She thinks they should work with the Klingons and reject the humans' offer. Now, Kirk argues that the big difference between them and the Klingons is that the Klingons, as he says, your planet will always be yours. We'll never try to take it from you or seize it. And that's what the Klingons will do. That's what they always do. And eventually they would try to take your world, possession of your world from you. Mob, however, wants to stick with the Klingons, and he tells Akar that there are others who agree as he does, and they like the Klingons because of their warrior ways, And Akar is he doesn't like the lip he's getting from Mob, and he's basically just like, what, you talking to me, punk? And he says that he needs to think about this. After Mob and the Klingon leave, Kirk asks that they have their communicators back so they can contact the ship. Because Kirk's worried about maybe Klingon ships being in the vicinity. Akar he says, I have no concern about what is happening up in the sky or something like that, and basically won't return the communicator. Now, back on the ship, again, they're trying to track that ship, but then it disappears from their sensors. On the planet, a mob mounts a coup, basically, to try and seize power. In the chaos, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy go to Akar's to try and get their phasers, but the Klingon is already there, looking for his blaster or his disruptor. He and Kirk get into a fight. Then Mob shows up and informs them that Akar is dead and now he is the ruler. Oh, and also, by the way, please do like the video here, if you would. Now, Uhura gets a distress signal from a freighter called the u.s.s. Deidre. And after listening to the message where they request assistance, Scotty is trying to figure out what move they should make. Should they go after and investigate this distress signal, or should they stick there? He doesn't want to abandon Kirk and the others. Back on the planet, they're brought to Mob, and Mob wants to kill Eliane because, of course, she's bearing the previous tier's child, and the child, if it lives, could be a threat to his rule. So he's going to kill her, but Kirk intervenes, which is a no-no because you're not even supposed to touch the wife of a tier. Never mind, like, interfering in an execution. They get into a fight, but they get overpowered. And Eliane is furious that Kirk has, touched her, and she demands they be executed and says she wants to see him die. Now, back on the Enterprise, Scotty decides that it's time for them to go investigate the distress signal. I believe that's it. And back on the planet, Kirk and the others have retrieved their communicators, but not their phasers, and they flee into the surrounding hills with Eliane. And McCoy wants to treat her. Her arm was burned, so he wants to treat her burn, but of course she won't let him touch her. And she she slaps him, and then McCoy slaps the crap out of her. And then after that, she allows him to treat her. And then after treating the arm, he examines her belly. And he is concerned because he says the baby could come at any time. Now, Kirk and Spock spot Mob and a hunting party that's chasing them down in the lower hills. So Kirk and Spock set up their communicators to create a kind of a sonic disruption that will cause the loose rock and shale in the surrounding cliffs to come loose and basically ambush them with an avalanche. And it works. In the chaos, the Klingon takes one of the phasers off of a dead Capellan, and, well, actually, he's not dead when he takes it. He takes it and then he kills the Capellan. Now, back on the Enterprise, they're searching for the u.s.s. Deidre, but they are having no luck finding it. It's not at the location where it should have been. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy find a cave and take shelter there. And McCoy is going to help her deliver her baby. While she's doing that, Kirk and Spock fashion some simple bows and arrows rather quickly. I mean, they come up with these bow and arrows pretty quick. And then the baby is born. McCoy shows it to them. And McCoy tries to offer the baby to Spock, and Spock's like, I don't know nothing about birthing no baby. Now, back on the Enterprise, they're still looking for this missing freighter and still not finding anything. McCoy dozes off, and while he's sleeping, Elian whacks McCoy over the head and escapes. Okay, and this is actually the first episode where we see Sulu's kind of viewer. I don't know what you'd call this thing, but it's the first episode where this actually shows up. Now, they eventually decide that this is some kind of a trick because they listen to the distress signal again, and the distress signal expressly asks for the Enterprise. So Scotty realizes this was, we've been. So he orders the ship back to Capella. As they approach the planet, there is a Klingon ship in their path, pretty much just daring them to go any further. Down on the planet, Elian escapes and gets back to Mob and the others. Now, she tells them that the others, including the baby, are all dead. But the Klingon's not buying it, and he wants to go investigate and make sure they're dead. Mob says, look, if she says they're dead, they're dead. There's no more, her word is good enough, but he's not buying it. And then he gets shot, takes an arrow to the knee from Kirk. But then he pulls his phaser and he shoots one of the Capellans. And then Mob challenges him. And then Crass gets hit with one of the Kliegets, one of the throwing weapons. And then he uses his phaser and kills Mob as well. Then Scotty and some red shirts arrive. And I don't know, the thing just kind of ends. It's just like they show up and then everyone's just kind of like, oh, never mind. And, and I mean, they literally just turn to start walking away and the Capellan sitting there watching like, okay, now what? Now back on the ship as they're leaving, McCoy announces that the new baby, who is now the regent because Mob was dead, is going to be ruling the planet. Of course, Elian will be the regent for him because he's an infant. And she secured the mining agreement, so the Federation got what it's wanted. So all's well that ends well. And McCoy says that the baby is going named Leonard James Akar. And Spock is dismayed to learn about this, saying that Kirk and McCoy are going to be insufferable for the next month at least. Okay. Let me take a drink of water right quick here. Okay. All right. So Dorothy Fontana, having delighted Star Trek's producers and the network with her scripts for Charlie X, Tomorrow Is Yesterday, and This Side of Paradise, described her leading right assignment as basically an adventure, but admitted that, quote, in a way it was sort of a woman's lib story, but I didn't mean it that way. Let's let me pull that down. All right. Let me. There we go. Okay. What drew Fontana to this story was her hunch that it could be interesting to watch a pair of pawns become the most powerful players in the game, especially if one of the pawns were a woman in a very male dominated society and the other was her unborn child. Fontana wanted the primary female character to be the polar opposite of how women were routinely portrayed on television at the time. Elian is both cunning and deceitful in her efforts to prosper in a ruthlessly male dominated society. And the last thing she wants is to have to care for another. Quote, my feeling was that not all women are mommies, Fontana said in an interview for this book. Some women do not like their children. Women do not want to have their children. Some abuse their children. And that was a very real fact for me. So I don't know. I guess she was abused as a child. I knew that, and I wanted to subtly bring it out. Not that you can beat up a kid on screen, obviously, but she, Elian, was willing to sacrifice the child for her own life. She's a very selfish woman. In this way, Fontana was following Roddenberry's lead, using Star Trek to tell stories and making commentary that cannot be done on other types of shows. Montana also enjoyed creating the brutal tribal culture, saying, quote, I really had a good time with that. The symbolism with birds, the fact that these people were very tall. I was borrowing a little from Arabic tribes, but I was also borrowing from the monarchies of Europe, where they were so regal all the time. I wanted to have that feeling of people who were very, very noble in their bearing and very regal in their look, but were kind of primitive. The story outline from January 11, 1967 was written at the tail end of production on the first season. This was earmarked as that season's episode 30 until NBC cut the order back to 29. Robert Justman, always a fan of Fontana's work, was quick to respond, writing to Gene Coon, quote, the outline is plenty nice, but how come everybody speaks English? Nearly every episode produced so far during the first season could explain away the convenience of English speaking people by parallel world stories or alternate universe stories or aliens so superior that they could easily comprehend the language, or that a translation device was being used, as with the Gorn and the companion in Metamorphosis. None of that would work here, but to tell a story like this, the two sides were going to have to talk, and NBC was not going for subtitles. Yes, J. Rocker. Vasquez Rocks. Yeah, yet another one filmed there. Jay Rocker says, I always like the episodes where Scotty is in command of the Enterprise. Yeah, it's always, well, I like this one because it gives McCoy a little more to do. You know, I always like the ones that kind of give him more to do as well. I don't know why the comments aren't showing up in StreamYard. I don't know. I don't get it. Oh, well. One thing Roddenberry wanted to change was the way the Capellans spoke. Justman had been fishing for an explanation as to why they would communicate in English. Roddenberry would be happy if they just spoke their English differently than we spoke ours. As written, he felt it was a bit too colloquial. One example he cited was how Akar tells Kirk, we are not an industrial people, Captain. Roddenberry suggested the line instead read, quote, we are herdsmen. To dig into the ground for metals is a strange thing for us. I'm an unfrozen caveman. Your ways are strange to me. Roddenberry got his way. Next draft, the aliens spoke English more like Native Americans in one of the TV westerns of the time. Roddenberry also asked that the Federation's interest not be limited to mining rights. In future drafts, Kirk offers to share knowledge, medicines, and other things to help advance the Capellans. Further, Roddenberry felt there needed to be more risk for Kirk and the landing party. It was his idea that the Enterprise be lured away by a distress call, leaving Kirk, Spock, and McCoy to fend for themselves. This constituted a substantial change for the plot. In Fontana's version of the story, the unfaithful and conniving Elian hates her baby so intensely that after escaping from Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, I should probably bring her up here. There she is. She is willing to, let me see. Where was I? Okay. She hates her baby so intensely that after escaping from Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, she brings the newborn to Mob. She is willing to let him kill the baby in exchange for sparing her. Kirk and company are captured while attempting to rescue the infant. In the end, Elian actually outfoxes herself and is executed for committing adultery. The story was different in many ways than that which was eventually aired on NBC. In her original version, Chekhov does not appear. His lines are spoken by another crewman named Frost. There are no Klingons, therefore no Klingon named Krass. In fact, other than the subplot where the Enterprise is lured away from the planet by a distress signal and then challenged by a Klingon ship, which Fontana added at Roddenberry's request, the Klingons are always discussed but never seen. McCoy never, in this version, McCoy had not previously visited the planet. There is no young and experienced security guard who draws his phaser in the teaser and gets killed. Akar has a teenage son from one of his other wives who is next in line to be High Chief of the 10 Tribes. Mob is Akar's brother and completely ruthless. Besides killing his older brother, Mob has Akar's teenage son murdered, and then he sets out to kill the unborn child that Elian carries. At the end of the story, Moab is executed for treason when it is learned he has been secretly negotiating with the Klingons. As for Elian's baby, he is left to be raised by his grandfather. Elian's father only until old enough to rule the tribes. The only light moment comes from the tag scene with the baby being named Leonard James Akar and Spock's observation that McCoy and Kirk are bound to be insufferably pleased with themselves. Gene Kuhn did a polish on the script at the start of May, attempting to soften some of the harsher aspects with the insertion of more humor. But Kuhn's final draft script missed the mark in Roddenberry's opinion, so he did a substantial rewrite on May 11th. Among the changes made by Roddenberry was the removal of Elian's negative characteristics, including her having cheated on her husband and wanting to kill the baby. She was still difficult with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. There would be no story if she weren't, but she behaves this way because of custom, not because of greed and lust. Among the additions by Roddenberry, Krass the Klingon is now in the story. McCoy was now established as the expert on the Capellan culture from having visited the planet years earlier. The death of the red shirt named Grant when he draws his phaser, but having Kirk makes Kirk appear unwise in choosing to take him on this mission. Yeah, kind of. The addition of Chekhov, Roddenberry had been responsible for the introduction of the character in Catspaw, and it was his idea to bring him back into this episode. A more positive theme, beside the change in Elian's character, with the selfless act of courage and sacrifice on her part in the final moments of the story, Mob is now a much more honorable man. Instead of being killed for treason, as Fontana had it, Mob takes responsibility for his poor judgment and sacrifices himself for the good of his tribe. Each character in the story now had his or her courage tested, including Scott on the Enterprise. And each, with the exception of Krass, the story's villain, proves themselves to be brave and willing to make sacrifices for that which they believe to be right. Fontana knew the rules of the TV game. As story editor, she was doing her share of rewriting on scripts by other writers. She also appreciated positive themes and certainly had written her share. But some of the changes Roddenberry made in the script upset her. She said, quote, I didn't like the tack it took on the woman, played by Julie Newmar. I wanted her to be a pretty ruthless character. I wanted it to be her at the end willing to sell her child for her own life. Just sacrifice the kid because you didn't see that kind of woman on television. And Jean wanted the traditional woman has baby, woman loves baby, automatic, no question about it, will do anything for her child. All the trappings were still there. The basic adventure of the story was there, and the culture of the episode stayed pretty much the same. The only thing I didn't have was that they couldn't touch her. Jean put that in. It was taboo to touch her, which of course precipitated the scene later on between her and McCoy, where she slaps him and he slaps her right back. That was Jean's too. I freely admit that, but I didn't like the script as much after it was changed. Roddenberry, defending his rewriting of a staff member to this author in the 80s, said, quote, one thing I am pleased with about Star Trek and offer no apology for is the positive themes present in many of our shows. You look at the fans 20 years later and you see, by large, very positive thinking individuals. That's what you find at the conventions. They come from all walks of life, but they share those ideals. It is clear there was an influence. Television, if used properly, is a wonderful tool not only for education, but examples of humanitarian values. Literature has always been a teacher and a means of conveying lessons in character. That was Star Trek by design. Dorothy's story for that one, Friday's Child, attempted to teach the importance of good character and good conduct by showing the negative results of bad characters and bad conduct. And that is certainly one road to take in telling a morality play. I preferred for Star Trek, and with that story in particular, to take a different road in communicating that message. Now, no writer likes being rewritten, but I stand behind the choices I made on that one. I think the show works. The day after Riley's rewrite was distributed, Fontana wrote to Gene Coon requesting that her pseudonym, Michael Richards, be used as the screen credit instead of her own name. She later said, quote, I threatened to take my name off of it, and Gene persuaded me not to. Now, having just seen footage from Cat's Paw, Robert Justman agreed with Roddenberry that Chekhov had a promise as a character and approved of adding him into this episode. Chekhov was given no lines for the briefing room scene, but by being present, early attention is put on the conspicuous character, as well as ushering in his first scene with series regulars Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. In another part of the script, Kuhn instigated a soon to be recurring Chekhov gag after Scotty remarks, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And then Chekhov boasts about the saying it is an old Russian expression. Oh, hey, Adega. Hello, good to see you, man. Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't react earlier. I don't know why, but the comments in the stream aren't showing up in StreamYard. I don't know why. So I have to look over at YouTube to see what people are posting. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Giving Jessman the little bit further change he wanted to see an alien from hostile to appreciative and added more moments of humor between her and McCoy, such as when she tells the doctor, to Kirk and Spock's astonishment, bring our child here, and the very cute Uchi Wuchi Coo business at the story's end. Joseph Pevney was back in the director's chair. There we go. He was back in the director's chair for the second time in the new season following Cat's Paw. His first task, work with casting director Joe DaGosta as well as Gene Roddenberry and Gene Coon in selecting the guest players, and one of them had to be a star. Julie Newmar as Eliane was a hot property on television and clearly deserving of the title of guest star. The 5'11" beauty. I didn't realize that she was that tall. That she was 5'11", nearly 6 feet. She never seemed that tall on Batman, but I don't know. I guess Adam West is pretty tall. She got her big break when she was cast as one of the brides in the 1954 MGM musical Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. Then as Stupefying Jones in 1959's Little Abner. That same year, Newmar went to Broadway and won a Tony Award for her performance in The Marriage Go Round. In 1965, she got her own TV series opposite Bob Cummings as a sexy robot on the show My Living Doll, which I've never heard of. I didn't know there had been a show like that. That like back in the mid 60s. That role put her on the cover of TV Guide. During 66 and 67, Newmar gained further fame as Catwoman on the immensely popular Batman. James Doohan said, quote, an offbeat piece of casting it was to have Julie Newmar as Elian, a 9 months pregnant woman. Julie has always been aggressively proud of her figure. Yeah, well, I mean, they got a photo of her in the Catwoman costume here in this book, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see why she would be. She had a pretty dynamite hourglass figure. Adam West was 6'2". Okay, yeah, all right. Well, that explains it. Okay, now Newmar's explanation to this author, quote, I did it because they asked me and there was an aura of sincerity to them and to the character. I'm not a Star Trek fan. I'm a ballet dancer. I'm in the arts. My world and interests are quite different than that of science fiction. But I know when I read something if it is worthwhile, and I know that in the first few pages. Good writing that is what saves a show. The heart of any show is the writing. We had Batman, and you've got it with Star Trek. Now, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Let me, okay, so Tige. I'm going to say Teague or Tige. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Teague Andrews was cast to play Krass, the Klingon villain. Prior to that, he was a regular on two popular series, as one of Sergeant Bilko's misfits on The Phil Silver Show and the puffing Johnny Russo on The Detectives. Joseph Pevney said, quote, Teague was a close friend of William Shatner, and that's how he got the role. He came from Canada. That's where Shatner knew him from. So when the time came to cast the role in Friday's Child, Shatner asked me to read Teague and see what I thought of him. And I liked his look, and he had a great look, and he worked out fine, I thought. And, I think when we always talk about Klingons on the original series, of course, we always talk about Kor and Kang and was it what's the other one? There's the three guys that played Klingons. Kor, Kang, and I'm blanking on the other name now, but Krass never gets mentioned. He's kind of slipped through the cracks over the years. I had enjoyed Star Trek or doing Friday's Child, Andrews said. When the producers offered me the role of Krass, I was very pleased to do it. This was the first time that I had been given the opportunity to wear a costume in a film role, and I was very much into it. I particularly remember feeling more like someone else during the filmmaking, and it was a fun part. Andrews was 47 and 1 year away from his third and most memorable role, playing Captain Adam Greer on the popular detective show The Mod Squad. Very nearly every tall actor and stuntman in Hollywood was called in to work for Friday's Child. Michael Dante was cast as Mob. He was 36 and stood 6'2". Dante had worked mostly in westerns as cavalrymen, cowboys, outlaws, and Indians. He had second billing as Red Hawk on the series Apache Rifles alongside Audie Murphy. And during the time the Star Trek was filmed, he had third billing as Sitting Bull in the ABC series The Legend of Custer. And they have a picture of him, kind of done up. He's got long black hair, obviously playing Sitting Bull. I mean, he doesn't look anything like a Native American, I don't think. I think his features actually, he looks very similar to Lee Majors in his facial features, like his nose and his eyes. Recalling the events that brought him to Star Trek, Dante said, quote, was contacted and summoned to Gene Roddenberry's office, and he and I were the only two there. There was no one else. Not Joe DeGasto or Robert Justman, no Gene Coon, just Roddenberry. I was flabbergasted because it never happened to me before like that. There was always a casting person in the room or a director or someone else to give the approval, but never a private meeting with the boss man, the executive in charge, and the inventor of the show. Dante was unaware that Roddenberry was good friends with Samuel Peoples, the creator and head writer on Custer, or that Peoples had written the Star Trek pilot Where No Man Has Gone Before and had even turned down the opportunity from Roddenberry to be the show's producer, the job that later went to Gene Coon. And this afforded Dante a private audience with the boss man. Roddenberry said, quote, my way of casting is different. Actors come prepared to answer the question they are typically asked at casting calls. Suddenly, with me, they find themselves discussing topsoil or a whole range of subjects that have nothing to do with being cast. The reason for this questioning is that I'm interested in getting a feel for them as people. The way I cast is to try and learn who this actor, this person really is. I try to find out if they fit in with my idea of the character. Dante told this author, quote, so Roddenberry said, I saw you on a show a couple of nights ago, and I thought you were great. You've done a lot of Westerns, so I know you'll understand what we're doing. It's like a Western in space. It's a good guy, bad guy, no grays. We know in the end who the culprit is. You're perfect for this role, and Julie Newmar will be cast as well. I want you to take the script and read it and let me know what you think. If you like it, the part's yours. And that was it. So I went home and read the script, and uh, the script had comedy, it had action, and it had drama, and that's what I liked about it. And I thought it was different from most of the scripts written for television at the time because it had all those elements, which was rare and certainly not easy to pull off. Action and drama can easily mix, but not always comedy, and it was my first science fiction job, so when I read it, I was excited about it because of being a sci-fi as well. It being sci-fi as well as having the action. And of course, the opportunity to work with Julie appealed to me too. Yeah, I'll bet. So I called my agent, said, yeah, I love it. I want to do this. Dante dialed into Roddenberry's theme of the revamped story and said, Mob wasn't a villain. He had this very strong concept of what his laws were. He was willing to die to preserve his people, which he did. And that's a very powerful character from which to draw upon. Everybody or everything he did, he was willing to back up with his life. And then this next guy, Cal Boulder, who played the part of Keel. And Keel is the guy, he's the one who kills the red shirt at the beginning of the episode. Let me see if I can bring that up here. There we go. Yeah, he's wearing this purple kind of lavender outfit. Hold on a moment. Okay. And I tell you, his name Boulder, he's aptly named because the guy's like 6'4", and and he's thickly built. He was a big dude. He was also 36 and had served as a California highway patrolman. After making an impression on a Hollywood agent that he had pulled over for speeding, Boulder, who stood 6'4", quit law enforcement for a brief career in TV, playing big lugs, cowboys, and bad guys. Ben Gage, 52 and standing 6'6". I can bring him up here. There he is. He played the high tier aka R. With a splendid baritone singing voice, Gage began in show business as a big band vocalist. And then for the movies, dubbing in the singing voices for a number of actors, including Victor Mature, George Montgomery, and Dana Andrews. Ben Gage also did a dead-on impression of James Arness, Gunsmoke's Marshal Matt Dillon. He showcased that impersonation as Sheriff Mort Dooley in the comical Gunshy series, one of the most infamous episodes, or Gunshy, one of the most infamous episodes of Maverick. The episode marked Walter Koenig's and Ensign Chekhov's second appearance. Now, James Doohan was being prominently showcased on the series as its unofficial fourth lead. Let's go back a bit. Yeah, this is I think every episode so far this season has had Scotty in charge on the bridge at some point. Interviewed for a 1968 fanzine, Doohan said, quote, "It took a long time to build up the character. They really didn't care about him in the first year. They just knew the ship had to have an engineer because ships don't run by themselves. But if you just say, gee, my engines aren't running, or I'll fix it right away, sir, it's a one-dimensional character, nothing human." The second season, they started to get more stuff for Scotty in the episodes. Friday's Child provided Scotty with his fourth turn and second in a row at running the bridge during Kirk's absence. Doohan said, quote, "I thought I ran the ship beautifully, to tell the truth. It was a nice change of pace, though I think Scotty's best place was in the engine room." The choreographed movements here with and around Scotty were designed to conceal his missing finger, the missing finger on Doohan's right hand. Note how, on the rare occasions when Scotty sits in the captain's chair, Doohan's right hand is either placed in his lap or held by his left hand or tucked out of sight behind the armrest. Something new at the helm was Sulu's viewscope. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, which rises out of the console. The impressive gadget was as state of the art as 1967 gizmos could get. Walter Koenig, for his memoir Warped Factors, recalled, quote, the cast was uncommonly friendly. James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, and DeForest Kelly made me feel instantly welcome. It was a tribute to them, I think, that I wasn't made aware of the concerns they had regarding their own status of the series. I was never treated as an interloper or as a threat to their position. And yeah, as Jay Rocker noted, let me bring this up. The show was filmed at Vasquez Rocks, and you can tell in some shots, like this kind of ravine they're in here, it has that kind of look. Okay, normally the month of May is a safe time to journey into the desert for a day of production, but during this time in 1967, Southern California was experiencing a heat wave. Quote, man, it was hot, Michael Dante said during an interview for Starlog. As Mob, Dante's costume was better suited for winter. I remember that Julie Newmar and director Pevney had a difference of opinion. This discrepancy got a little heated between them, and heated was uncalled for. It was about 110 degrees, and here we were working, and Julie had certain things that she wanted to do about her character's motivation. Joe finally said, motivation's motivation. I want you to be over here. And I said to Julie, quote, hey, it's hot out here. Let's just get going. Let's do it and get on to the next scene because I'm going to roast under this costume. She looked at me, smiled, and her sense of humor took over, and that was the end of it. It was nothing tragic, but it was terribly hot. We had to drink a lot of water to avoid dehydration. Newmar said, quote, I wasn't much fun having the pillow strapped, or it wasn't much fun having the pillow strapped to my belly sticking out of my front, and that stiff kind of dialogue these people spoke in the dusty, dry, hot environment that we worked in. I've been on the stage and a member of the Actors Studio with Marlon Brando and all those great artists, and TV's a different thing. It speaks all about haste. I had always had the ability to go between the art forms of stage and film and TV, but each one has demands and kinds of abuses you in its own way. Pevney saved the avalanche scene for the end of the day. And there we go. Dante said, quote, these rocks were made of styrofoam and paper mache, and it was kind of comical. We had a rehearsal, and I wasn't quite under the rock ledge. When the rocks rolled down, one of the prop men didn't get one in place, and it clobbered me. In reality, it would have crushed every bone in my body, but Joe Pevney got a kick out of it. Regarding his coworkers and the drive back to Desilu, Dante said, quote, Shatner was very professional. I thought he did a good job, believable, and he was cordial. We had a few laughs, and other than the heat, enjoyed the shoot. And of course, Julie can be very fey, which means she's a little out there, a little different. We had a nice chat when we rode back in the bus. The studio had provided the bus to take us to Rocks and back to the Hollywood parking lot where our cars were. And we had a great time on that ride. Julie was a character, and she has a real strange sense of humor. The inhospitable conditions of the location continued on the next day. Dante said, quote, it was even hotter the second day, 117 degrees. I lost 7 pounds that one day alone. We couldn't drink the water fast enough. It was so hot because we were boxed in. And I think he's talking about, they were filming down in this ravine. And I guess there was no breeze coming in and no shade. And as a result, it was almost kind of like heaven. And yeah, I mean, I can I can relate having done a tour in Iraq. All I kept thinking about was let's get this done and get out of here. Please, let's just do it in one take. Everybody just get it done. The cameras were getting overheated too. They had to put ice packs on the cameras to keep them from overheating. Everybody was not moving around in their normal gait. Whatever assignment they had, whether behind the camera or behind it, they were moving just a bit slower. The less movement we had, the better we all were. They had a couple of those large umbrellas, like beach umbrellas, for us to sit under to get a little shade. It wasn't so bad at the top of the hill, but down below, with the confines of those rocks, it was like an oven. There was no circulation, no wind, no breeze to come through. It was like we were walled up into a hot box. And by the second day of that, everyone was pretty worn out. So they then returned to Desilu. And of course, after those first 2 days, they did most of their filming inside on sound stages, so they were able to avoid the heat. All problems aside, Joseph Pevney continues to amaze and delight his producers. This ambitious production, with location filming, explosions, landslides, sweltering heat, and numerous hand to hand or hard to fight tense sequences, wrapped only one half day over schedule. Yeah, there is a lot going on in this episode, you have to admit. A lot of little plot lines being juggled, and they're cutting back and forth from the Enterprise to the planet. And Jay Rocker says Michael Dante was also in an Elvis Presley movie, Kid Galahad. Oh, was he? Okay. All right. So at a total cost of $211,880, or roughly 1.5 million in 2013, Friday's Child was about $31,880 over budget. 3 episodes were now completed, and season 2 had a $76,588 deficit. Michael Dante was watching the night Friday's Child had its network airing. He said, quote, I thought the comedy between the Doctor and Julie was well played. It is surprising that they found the time to show it and develop it within the confines of an hour show, minus the commercials. So you have maybe 50 minutes to get all of that in. And nowadays it's more like 40 minutes because there's just so many commercials. It was a lot of story for 50 minutes. That's what I thought when I saw it for the first time. How surprising it was that they were able to squeeze in everything that they wrote and that we filmed without chopping and editing it to death. And that they could make their point and at the same time give it to the 3 dimensions of action, drama, and comedy, rather than a one-dimensional piece like most TV at the time. And to do it so well that all 3 elements could be appreciated. Dante wasn't alone in watching Star Trek. According to AC Nielsen Media, nearly 11 million households across America tuned in to see Friday's Child. So in the first half hour, it drew 10,860,000 viewers and was second in the ratings behind Gomer Pyle. Gomer Pyle was way ahead with Star Trek had a 26.6 audience share. Gomer Pyle had a 43.4. And in the second half hour, Star Trek had a 26.7 audience share, and the CBS Friday Night Movie had a 37.0. Dorothy Fontana lamented, I never really cared much for that episode because I couldn't get the message across that I wanted. That not all women are mommies. Not all mothers are mommies. I felt Gene changed the whole attitude. In changing that central character, he changed the story. Joseph Petney, excuse me. Joseph Pevney saw nothing wrong with the rewriting of Friday's Child. He said, that was a funny show, a great show. Julie Newmar responding in 2010 to a question as to whether Friday's Child holds up, quote, despite the foam rocks, those crazy costumes and primitive effects, she said, but it's always in the story, isn't it? It's the involvement that people have in the story and the characters, whether they love or hate the characters, and that's there. I was very amazed with Bill Shatner's performance. He is the superstar he deserves to be, and oddly enough, I was very surprised by my own performance. I quite liked it. Teague Andrews said, quote, I'm part of the majority. I've seen much of the Star Trek because I enjoyed it. It was a well-written series with good production values, and I'm a fan. Michael Dante said, the fans truly love the characters of Star Trek. I've had fans saying, quote, we really hated to see Maude die. We hoped you could come back or be a running character. The fans of the show are wonderful, and they're in a class by themselves. Okay. And if I didn't, I don't know if I mentioned the grade before. I'm kind of going back and forth between C plus and a B minus. I'll give it a B minus, I guess, and be charitable. The way the show ends, it just really, it just really ends kind of abruptly. I mean, Scotty and the others kind of show up, and then it's like, okay, I guess we're all done here. Let's go home. I mean, the scene where they just start chit-chatting and walk away, and the Capellans are all just kind of standing there. I don't know. It just kind of cracks me up. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm at 57 minutes, so I guess we will wrap it up there. Next week, what is next? Okay, so next week is Who Mourns for Adonias. That's a fun episode, so covering that'll be fun. I want to thank everyone who showed up for the stream. And again, if you haven't subbed to the channel, please do so, and please like the stream before you leave. And I guess I will see you all next week, and I'll see you then. Good night.